Welcome to my YouTube channel, Revenge Chronicles. My name is Matilda Mabel, and for more than 40 years, I believed I was living in a marriage built on trust. I owned a small bakery in Austin, Texas, the kind of place where the smell of warm bread greets you before you even step inside. People in town often said I was blessed, that I had a hardworking husband, George, and a loving son, Arthur. From the outside, our family looked like the picture of stability, but behind the closed doors of my home, I was about to discover a betrayal so deep it would shake the foundation of everything I thought I knew. It started on a quiet evening when George returned from another one of his so-called business dinners. He looked exhausted, or at least he acted the part. He tossed his jacket on the couch and collapsed onto the bed without even changing clothes. As he slept, a strange perfume lingered in the air, a scent that did not belong to me. Something inside me stirred. The intuition of a wife is rarely wrong, and mine was screaming louder with each passing day. Later that night, I walked into the garage, opened the compartment of his old sub, and found a tube of personal lubricant. My hands trembled as I held it. George and I had not shared that kind of intimacy in years. What was it doing there? I did not say a word. I simply replaced the contents with industrial strength superglue. I placed it back exactly where it had been and closed the glove box. At that moment, I did not fully understand where this decision would lead. I only knew one thing: George's lies were about to collide with the truth, and when they did, the entire neighborhood would hear the sound of it. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee growing cold between my hands. The house was heavy with silence, the kind that presses against your chest. George came down the stairs, his tie crooked, his eyes shadowed. He barely looked at me as he muttered something about an early meeting. It was the same excuse he had been using for months. I watched him leave, his car pulling away from the driveway, and felt that silence grow louder, more accusing. When you live with someone for decades, you learn their patterns, their rhythms, their moods. George's were no longer familiar. He carried an invisible weight, and no matter how carefully he tried to mask it, I could feel the distance widening between us. There was a time when he would sit with me, ask about the bakery, even help roll dough on Saturday mornings. Now he brushed past me like a stranger late for a train. I tried to convince myself it was just age, stress, the natural erosion of long marriages. But then came the details too sharp to ignore: the faint trace of an unfamiliar perfume on his shirts, the way he pulled out his phone and quickly turned the screen away whenever I entered the room, the dinner receipts from places he never mentioned. Once he told me he was meeting partners in Dallas, but the slip of paper in his pocket said Antonio. Small things, yes, but small things are often where the truth hides. I wanted to ask him directly, to demand an answer, but something stopped me. Perhaps it was fear of hearing what I already knew. Instead, I folded the silence around myself like a blanket, waiting, watching, and preparing for the storm that was bound to come. That evening, after George had gone to bed, I gathered his jacket and emptied the pockets before placing it in the laundry basket. A folded receipt slipped onto the floor. My hand stilled as I picked it up. It was from an upscale steakhouse in San Antonio, dated that very night. My chest tightened. George had sworn he was in Dallas. The receipt showed two entries: a fine bottle of Cabernet and dessert for two. I could almost see the candle light reflected in his glass, the smile he once saved only for me. I placed the receipt on the counter and tried to calm my racing thoughts. Perhaps it was a client dinner, perhaps. He had not mentioned it because it meant nothing, but then I remembered his words. From years ago, how he hated the long drive to Dallas, yet San Antonio had always been a place of warm memories for him, and now he was creating new ones. But not with me. Later, as I cleaned the living room, I noticed his phone buzzing with a new email George never used. Email, he always joked he was too old. For all that, still the subject line glowed on the screen. I hesitated then. Opened it, just 5 words, each one a knife to my chest. You are amazing. Tonight, Dad, my breath caught. Who was calling him Dad with such intimacy? Why did it feel less like family and more like a lover's whisper? I placed the phone back exactly where I found it, my fingers trembling. My heart wanted to dismiss it all as a mistake, but my instincts refused to be silenced. The gel in the glove box, the perfume, the receipt, the email, they were puzzle pieces forming a picture I was terrified to see. I knew I needed help. Proof, answers I could not deny. The next morning, I picked up the phone and dialed a number I had not used in years. Donna Miller, an old friend from my early bakery days, answered with her warm but slightly surprised voice. We had lost touch, but I remembered her once telling me, if you ever need to know the truth about someone, I know a man who can help. At the time I had laughed, now my hands shook as I asked for his name. Within the hour, Donna sent me a message with a contact, Thomas Reed, private investigator. He specialized in infidelity cases, she said, and he was discreet. My pride ached as I stared at the number, but pain is easier to bear when balanced against the need for answers. I dialed in a calm, professional voice answered. By noon, I was sitting in a small cafe downtown, the smell of roasted coffee in the air, waiting for a stranger to help unravel my life. Thomas arrived wearing a light blue shirt and carrying a small notebook. He listened without judgment as I slid a flash drive across the table filled with photos I had taken, the gel, the napkins, the receipt, the email. My voice trembled as I explained my suspicions. He nodded slowly, jotting down details. Mrs. Blake, he said quietly, I will begin following your husband this afternoon. Do not worry, I will update you as soon as I can. His words steady, though my heart still felt like it might collapse. That evening, as I was sorting in voices at the bakery, my phone buzzed. A message from Thomas appeared on the screen. Attached was a photo of George walking into a restaurant. My stomach twisted as I zoomed in. He was not alone. His hand was holding another smaller hand, and the woman beside him, her dark hair, her familiar figure was unmistakable. It was Allison, my daughter-in-law Arthur's wife, the mother of my grandchild. My entire world shifted in that moment. Betrayal had a face, and it was one I had welcomed into my family. The foe burned into my mind long after I set the phone down. Allison, the young woman I had embraced as a daughter, the one I had taught to make our family's flan recipe, who had sat at my table on holidays and called me Mom. Now she was walking hand in hand with my husband. It felt as though the floor beneath me had given way, leaving nothing but a dark abyss. Over the next several days, Thomas sent more evidence, each piece sharper than the last. A video of George and Allison laughing together in a dimly lit corner of an expensive restaurant, the way his eyes softened. When he looked at her, a gaze I had not seen directed at me in decades, photos of them checking into a hotel under the cover of night, and then came the audio, recording snippets of whispered conversations caught by careful surveillance, Allison's voice low and urgent. Dad, hurry up with those papers. I want the whole chain of stores in my name. I want that old woman out of the picture. My stomach nodded at her words. That old woman, she was speaking about me. George's response was calm, almost amused. Do not worry. Miriam trusts me too much. She will never see it coming. They were not only betraying me in love, but plotting to steal the bakery I had built with my own hands, every loaf of bread, every sleepless night, every delivery before sunrise. They wanted it all without lifting a finger. I sat in the bakery office late into the night, the glow of the screen highlighting my lined face as I replayed the files again and again. Each word felt like a hammer, shattering the fragile glass of my trust. 40 years of marriage reduced to lies. The man who once promised me forever now scheming behind my back with the very woman who had vowed to love my son. I saved every file, every photo onto a flash drive. I printed them, labeled them with dates and times, and placed them in a thick envelope. My hands moved with mechanical precision. Though my heart was breaking, betrayal is not just the loss of love, it is the theft of your past, the rewriting of your history, the mocking of every sacrifice you made. And as I stared at the pile of evidence before me, one truth became clear. If George and Allison thought I would surrender quietly, they had underestimated me completely. I knew I could not confront them directly. Words would only give them time to prepare lies, to cover their tracks, to twist the truth until even Arthur doubted me. No, I needed more than confrontation. I needed a plan that would leave no space for denial. Moments so undeniable that neither George nor Allison could escape from it. Revenge, yes, but more than that, a way to reveal their deception to the world without me speaking a single word. The first step was subtle. Late at night, when George snored heavily in the bedroom, I crept into the garage. Tube of lubricant still sat in the glove compartment like a silent witness. With steady hands, I emptied it and refilled it with industrial superglue, drop by drop, until it looked perfectly untouched. At a glance, no one would suspect the difference. I wiped my hands clean, placed it back, and shut the compartment softly. It was a small seed, planted in secret, waiting for its time to sprout. The second step required foresight. I retrieved Arthur's old voice recorder from a drawer where it had sat unused for years. I replaced the batteries, set it on continuous record, and hid it behind the bedroom bookshelf, camouflaged by a family photo frame. If George brought Allison into our home, I would have their words, their laughter, their betrayal etched into memory. No one could call it hearsay. Finally, I prepared what I called my smoke trap. In the kitchen, I positioned a skillet of oil on the stove and tied a thin string to the igniter. I looped it through the window and attached it to a heavy coffee tin outside. With a single pull from a distance, the oil would ignite, sending dark smoke curling into the sky, enough to alarm neighbors, enough to bring the fire department rushing to my door. And if my instincts were right, Arthur himself would arrive, forced to face the truth he never imagined. Each piece fit together like dough, rising in the oven, slow but certain. I moved through the house like a ghost, silent and determined. They thought they were clever, but they did not know me. I was Matilda Mabel, and I was ready to end their game. The morning of my plan, I told George the first had to travel to Nashville to sign a new contract for the bakery. His eyes lit up with a strange relief that cut me deeper than any knife. He kissed my cheek lightly, muttered a half-hearted good luck, and hurried off to work. I knew what he was really thinking. With me gone, the house would finally be his stage. I crossed the street with my overnight bag and knocked on the door of my neighbor, Mrs. Peterson. She welcomed me in with her usual kindness, and I asked if I might spend the day there. From her front window, I had a perfect view of my own driveway. She did not press me for details, though the worry in her eyes told me she sensed more than I revealed. I settled into a chair with a cup of coffee, my phone in hand, waiting. Around 10:00, a taxi pulled up. Allison stepped out wearing a light summer dress and oversized sunglasses, her head turning nervously before she darted toward my door. George appeared within seconds, ushering her inside as though they were teenagers sneaking behind their parents' backs. My chest burned, but I stayed silent. It was time. I pulled up the recording app linked to the hidden device in my bedroom. Through my earbuds, I heard their voices fill the space I once called sacred. George's deep laugh, Allison's cruel words, "The old woman is gone. We don't have to hide anymore." The bed creaked, and I removed the earbuds before my stomach turned. Enough. It was time to finish this. I tugged the string attached to the stove. Within moments, thick black smoke poured from the kitchen window. Mrs. Peterson gasped and rushed to the door, shouting for neighbors. Fire at Miriam's house. Within minutes, half the street was outside, pointing, whispering, dialing the fire department. I stood behind the curtain, my pulse steady, my heart strangely calm. The wail of a siren echoed down the street, growing louder, until a bright red fire truck screeched to a halt in front of my house, and there, climbing down from the driver's seat in his uniform, was Arthur, my son. His voice rang out clear and commanding. "Get the equipment, move fast." He led his team through the smoke, sledgehammer in hand. The door splintered under the blow, and they stormed inside. I remained at the window, knowing exactly what they were about to find. George and Allison, glued together in their shame, exposed not just to Arthur, but to every set of eyes in the neighborhood. The chaos spilled into the street as the firefighters carried George and Allison out of the house, their bodies wrapped in sheets, but their humiliation laid bare. Neighbors gasped, whispered. Some even laughed. Behind their hands, Arthur's face was pale as stone, his jaw tight, his eyes refusing to meet mine. He barked orders to his team, his voice steady, but I knew his heart was breaking. An ambulance rushed them to the hospital, and I followed quietly with Mrs. Peterson at my side. Hours passed in the sterile hallway before a doctor emerged, wiping sweat from his forehead. "There. Stable," he said carefully. The situation was unusual. We managed to separate them, no permanent damage. He looked at me with pity, as if searching for the right words to offer a wife. Betrayed. When I finally entered the room, George lay propped against pillows, his face pale, while Allison sat on the edge of her bed, eyes red and swollen. They both looked up in shock, caught between guilt and desperation. George's voice cracked. "Miriam, I can explain," but I raised my hand and cut him off. From my bag, I pulled a thick envelope and placed it firmly on the table. Inside were the photos, the receipts, the recordings, every piece of Their deceit, along with divorce papers, ready for his signature. Allison, I said evenly, you've not only betrayed me, but you destroyed my sons. Trust, and George, 40 years of marriage. End here, sign and do whatever you wish. After, but you will do it far away from me and from Arthur. Allison sobbed, begging Arthur for forgiveness, but he turned and walked out of the room without a word. George reached for me, his hand trembling, but I stepped back. You made your choice, I whispered, and then I left the door, closing behind me like the final chapter of a book one would never reopen. The days after the hospital felt like walking through the ruins of a once beautiful home. The walls of my life were still standing, but the heart of it had been ripped away. Yet in that emptiness, I discovered something I had forgotten, the quiet strength of starting over. Arthur moved into the house within a week. He carried his suitcase in with little ceremony, his face tired but determined. Mom, he said softly, I need time. I can't go back there, not after what I saw. I'll help with the bakery, whatever you need. I opened my arms, and for the first time in weeks, we held each other not as mother and son, bound by tragedy, but as partners facing the future together. Life at the bakery slowly returned to rhythm. I rose before dawn, kneading dough while Arthur handled orders and deliveries. Customers filled the small shop, their kind words carrying me through the hardest days. Mrs. Peterson stopped by often, buying her favorite flan and reminding me with a gentle smile, you're stronger than you think. Miriam, her faith in me became a balm for wounds that still stung. Evenings were quieter now. Arthur and I shared simple meals at the kitchen table. Bread, soup, sometimes just coffee and cake. One night he asked me almost shyly, Mom, can you make FL this weekend like you used to? I smiled, a real smile, and said, only if you helped stir the caramel. His laughter filled the room, a sound I thought I might never hear again. In that moment, I realized healing had begun. I also began to carve out space for myself. I joined a cooking club at the community center where women my age swapped recipes and stories. On Sundays, I returned to church, sitting quietly the pews, praying not for George or Allison, but for Arthur and for myself. Slowly, I felt light seeping back into places once dark. The betrayal had taken much, but it had not taken everything. I still had my son, my bakery, and my to rise again. Looking back now, I see the betrayal for what it was, not just a broken marriage, but a test of my spirit. George and Allison thought they could strip me of my dignity, my bakery, and even my family. They succeeded in breaking my heart, but they failed to break me. In the end, they were left with shame while I remained with what truly mattered. The bakery stands as proof of that. Every morning, when the smell of fresh bread fills the air, I am reminded of the life I built with my own two hands. Customers come through the door, not just for pastries, but to share a smile, a story, or a kind word. And beside me, Arthur works with quiet strength, healing in his own time, showing me that love between a mother and son is stronger than any storm, if there is one lesson I carry from all this, it is that intuition should never be ignored. Woman's instinct is not weakness, it is wisdom earned through years of love, sacrifice, and survival. And when betrayal comes, as cruel as it may be, we are not powerless. We can stand, rebuild, and even thrive again. So too, anyone listening, if this story touched your heart, let me know where you are hearing it from. Share it, subscribe, and join me for more stories of resilience and truth. Together we remind the world that no matter what is taken from us, our strength can never be stolen.